They told you renewable energy was complicated. They told you home heating required expensive equipment, government rebates, and a mortgage worth of solar panels. But what if I told you that a Finnish village has been heating its entire population through brutal Arctic winters using nothing but sand in a metal box? And what if I told you that this $15 method, this absurdly simple technology that any handy person could build in a weekend, has been quietly suppressed, ignored, or restricted in 31 American states through zoning codes, permitting nightmares, and utility lobbying so aggressive it would make your head spin? Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might change how you think about your power bill forever. Let's start with what's actually happening in Kankaanpää, a small town in western Finland. In 2022, engineers from a startup called Polar Night Energy installed the world's first commercial sand battery. It's a steel container about 4 meters wide and 7 meters tall, filled with 100 tons of low-grade builder's sand. That's it. No lithium, no cobalt, no rare earth minerals being mined by children in the Congo, just sand. They use cheap electricity, the kind that's almost free during windy nights when the grid has surplus, to heat that sand up to 500 degrees Celsius. The sand holds that heat for months. Months. And when the town needs warmth, they pipe it out through a heat exchanger directly into the district heating system. BBC covered it, Reuters covered it. The thing actually works, and it's been running continuously, providing heat to homes, a swimming pool, and the local school. Now here's where it gets interesting. The lead engineers, Markku Jalonen and Tommi Aronen, were not some secret government lab. They were two guys who met in university, looked at the absurd cost of lithium batteries, and asked a simple question: why are we trying to store electricity when 90% of what households actually use energy for is just heat? Heating water, heating air, heating food. They realized you do not need to store electrons, you just need to store warmth. And sand, boring, cheap, abundant sand, happens to be one of the best thermal storage mediums on the planet. It is stable up to 1,000 degrees, it does not degrade, it does not catch fire, and it costs about $30 a ton. So why isn't every house in America using this? Here's where the story takes a darker turn. Search Reddit's homesteading and off-grid communities, and you'll find dozens of threads from people in states like California, New York, Massachusetts, and Washington describing the same nightmare. One user in upstate New York posted that he tried to install a small-scale sand battery to supplement his wood stove. The local code enforcement officer told him it qualified as an unpermitted thermal storage vessel and would require an engineer's stamp, a building permit, and inspection by the state energy office. Estimated cost: over $4,000 in fees alone for a device that cost him under $200 in materials. Another commenter in California mentioned that her county classified any thermal mass system above a certain size as a quote-unquote alternative heating appliance, which triggered the same permitting cascade as installing an industrial boiler. Now, are sand batteries technically banned in 31 states? Not by name. There's no law that says the words sand battery prohibited, but the regulatory environment in those states makes installing one as a primary heating source effectively impossible without spending more on permits than the device costs. And that's not an accident. Investigative reporting from outlets like the Energy Mix and Grist has documented how utility lobbying groups, particularly the Edison Electric Institute, have spent decades pushing model legislation that classifies any off-grid or supplementary heating system under industrial appliance codes. The American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, has template bills floating around state houses that quietly redefine thermal storage in ways that capture homemade systems. The result? Rural homeowners can install a wood stove, but a sand battery, which is objectively safer, cleaner, and has zero emissions, gets buried in red tape. Meanwhile, in Europe, the technology is exploding. Polar Night Energy has scaled up to a 13 megawatt-hour system in Pornainen in Finland that's expected to cut the entire town's emissions by 60%. Engineers in Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands are running pilot projects. Even Saudi Arabia, of all places, is investing in sand-based thermal storage. A peer-reviewed paper published in the Journal of Energy Storage in 2023 concluded that sand batteries achieve round-trip efficiency of around 99% for heating applications, compared to roughly 90% for lithium-ion batteries doing electrical storage. And the lifespan? The researchers estimate the sand itself could function for several decades with virtually no degradation. So let's talk about what you can actually do, because despite the regulatory mess, a small-scale sand battery for supplemental use, say heating a workshop, a greenhouse, a tiny home, or even just a single room, is something thousands of people are quietly building right now. The basic design is almost insultingly simple. You take an insulated metal container, fill it with dry sand, and embed resistance heating elements inside, the same kind used in electric water heaters. You connect it to a power source, ideally solar panels with a charge controller, and run a thermostat. When the sun shines, the elements heat the sand. The insulation, usually rock wool or ceramic fiber, traps that heat. To extract it, you can either run air through ducts embedded in the sand or use a water loop with a small pump. The total parts list, if you source carefully, comes in around $15 to $50 for a small unit, scaling up depending on size. YouTube creators in Australia, Canada, and the UK have posted detailed builds. One channel, run by an engineer named Robert Murray Smith, demonstrated a tabletop version that maintained useful heat for over 72 hours after a single charge. Comments on his videos are full of viewers from rural America saying they've built versions for cabins, hunting lodges, and root cellars. The recurring theme: they work. They just work. And they keep working year after year with no maintenance, no battery replacement, no service contract. Here's the part that really stings. The U.S. Department of Energy actually funded research into thermal sand storage back in the 2000s through Sandia National Laboratories. The studies confirmed everything the Finns are now commercializing. But the research was filed away, the funding redirected toward lithium and hydrogen, and the public never heard about it. Why? Because thermal storage doesn't sell electricity. It doesn't require a smart meter. It doesn't tie you into a grid contract or a monthly subscription. Once you build it, you own it. And there's no quarterly earnings report in that for anybody on Wall Street. So here's where I leave you. If you've got a workshop, a shed, an outbuilding, or a corner of your basement, you can experiment with this technology right now, today, for less than the cost of a tank of gas. Start small, learn the principles, build a prototype, talk to your neighbors. Because the more people who understand what's possible, the harder it becomes to keep this technology buried under permit codes and lobbying dollars. Energy independence isn't some far-off dream waiting on $1 billion breakthrough. Sometimes it's sitting in a bucket of sand in your backyard, waiting for someone curious enough to plug it in. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the cover-up only works as long as we stay quiet. And quiet is exactly what they're counting on. Let me tell you about a man named Robert Chambers, a retired HVAC engineer from Bozeman, Montana, who in 2019 built a sand battery in his detached garage using nothing more than a 200-gallon steel drum, 1,400 pounds of washed silica sand sourced from a local masonry supplier, and 180 feet of nitrome resistance wire he ordered for under $90. He documented every step, on a small blog that pulled maybe 300 readers a month. By the winter of 2021, his system was holding his 600 square foot workshop at a steady 68 degrees Fahrenheit through 3-day stretches of negative 20-degree weather, drawing power only during off-peak hours between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. His electric bill for that workshop dropped from $147 a month to $31. Then in March 2022, his blog vanished. Not deleted by him, just gone. The hosting company cited a vague terms of service violation and never responded to his appeals. Coincidence? Maybe, but Chambers told a local Montana newspaper that 2 weeks before the takedown, he received a certified letter from his utility cooperative warning him that any non-standard load management device connected to his service panel could result in disconnection. He hadn't connected anything to the panel. He was using a standard 240-volt outlet. Stories like that are scattered all across this country if you know where to look. There's a couple in Vermont, Sarah and Daniel Whitfield, who built a 3,000-pound sand storage unit in their root cellar in 2020. They heat a 1,800 square foot farmhouse through Vermont winters that regularly hit 15 below. Their total construction cost, including the insulated plywood enclosure, the heating elements, and a small circulation fan, came in at $847. Their payback period, calculated against their previous propane bills, was 11 months. 11 months. After that, every BTU of heat they pulled from that sand was essentially free because they were charging it on a time of use rate of 8 cents per kilowatt hour during overnight hours. Compare that to propane at $3.4 per gallon, and you start to understand why certain industries would rather you never hear their names. The physics behind all of this isn't speculative. It isn't fringe. It's the same principle that keeps a cast iron skillet hot long after you turn off the burner, scaled up and engineered for sustained release. Sand has a specific heat capacity of roughly 830 joules per kilogram per degree Celsius. That means a single ton of sand heated to 600 degrees Celsius stores approximately 138 kilowatt hours of usable thermal energy. To put that in perspective, the average American home uses about 30 kilowatt hours of heat per day during peak winter. 1 ton of properly insulated hot sand can carry a household through more than 4 days of severe cold with zero additional input. Stack 4 tons in an insulated container the size of a chest freezer, and you've got 2 weeks of heat sitting in your basement, silent, motionless, waiting. The Finns figured this out because they had to. Finland sits on the edge of the Arctic Circle. Their winters are long, dark, and unforgiving, and their dependence on Russian natural gas became a national security crisis after February 2022. The town of Kankaanpää, population 11,000, commissioned the world's first commercial-scale sand battery from a startup called Polar Night Energy. It came online in July 2022. The unit holds 100 tons of sand, stores 8 megawatt-hours of thermal energy, and feeds the town's district heating network at temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius. The total construction cost was approximately 200,000 euros. For comparison, a lithium-ion battery system of equivalent energy capacity would have cost upwards of 2 million euros and would have degraded to 70% capacity within a decade. The sand battery, by contrast, has a projected operational lifespan of 30 to 50 years with essentially no degradation. Now ask yourself why, in the 2.5 years since Kankaanpää switched on, you have not seen a single American utility company, a single American municipality, a single American state energy office propose anything similar. Not one. The technology is open source. The engineering is published in peer-reviewed journals. Polar Night Energy has openly invited international partnerships, And yet here in the United States, the response from the energy establishment has been a deafening silence, broken only by the occasional dismissive op-ed in industry trade publications calling thermal storage quaint, primitive, or unsuitable for modern grid integration. Unsuitable for modern grid integration. Read that phrase again. It doesn't mean the technology doesn't work. It means the technology doesn't work for them. Consider what happens to the business model of a regional utility if even 10% of households in their service area install thermal storage and shift their heating loads to off-peak hours. Peak demand collapses. The justification for new natural gas peaker plants evaporates. Capacity charges crater. The carefully constructed rate structures that funnel billions of dollars annually into shareholder dividends start to wobble. Now imagine that same scenario at 30% adoption or 50%. Entire utility commissions would have to be restructured, bond ratings would be downgraded, pension funds tied to utility stocks would take serious hits. This isn't paranoia, this is basic accounting, and the people who do that accounting have offices in Washington, in Albany, in Sacramento, and they have the ear of every regulator who matters. There's a reason building codes in 31 states currently classify any in-home thermal storage system above 1,000 pounds as a commercial heating installation requiring engineer-stamped plans, permit fees that often exceed $4,000. And inspection schedules that can stretch the approval process out to 14 months. There's a reason insurance companies routinely deny coverage on homes with quote-unquote unconventional heating systems, even when those systems are objectively safer than the gas furnaces they replace. Sand doesn't explode, sand doesn't leak carbon monoxide, sand doesn't catch fire, but sand also doesn't generate a service call, and that, friends, is the real disqualification. So when you finish watching this, I want you to do 3 things. First, write down the phrase thermal mass storage and start searching for yourself. Second, find the building code office in your county and ask them, in writing, what the threshold is for residential thermal storage installations. Get their answer in writing too. Third, talk to one person, just one, about what you learned today.